Good morning. My name is Felix Melendez. I'm the Vice President of the senior class. Fellow students and guests, welcome to this very special event. We would like to take a moment and introduce our guest speaker, who was born in South Africa and is an Indian American, social, political, activist, speaker, author, and agent of change. He is the fifth grandson of legendary leader Mahatma Gandhi.
Good morning. My name is Peyton Manor Howard, and I'm the president of the senior class. Mr. Arun Gandhi is a very popular speaker on college campuses and has traveled to China, France, and Japan, and many other countries around the world. In recent years, he has shared his grandfather's message with government officials such as President Clinton. His programs have changed the lives of over 500,000 people and over 300 villages around the world, and they still continue to grow today.
Be the change you want to see in the world. Good morning. My name is Brandon Joseph, and our speaker today has dedicated his life to being the change he wants to see in the world. Mr. Gandhi founded the Gandhi Worldwide Education Institute, a nonprofit organization that works to realize the vision of his historic namesake. The Institute's mission is to help individuals and communities develop the inner resources and particular skills needed to achieve a nonviolent, sustainable, and just world. The M.K. Gandhi Institute of Nonviolence is located at the University of Rochester. He has several honorary degrees and has participated in notable interfaith activities. Mr. Gandhi has dedicated his life to continuing the work of his grandfather, Mahatma Gandhi, began. It is my great honor and privilege to introduce Mr. Arun Gandhi. Please give him a warm welcome.
Speak here. Well, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here this morning. Sorry. I know you all sent me a list of questions, and I'm going to try and answer them as much as possible. As you were told in the introduction, I was born and brought up in South Africa at a time when there was a lot of prejudice in that country. And I was abused and beaten up and bullied all through my teenage years because I didn't fit into any color scheme. The whites thought I was too black and the blacks thought I was too white, and so I was beaten up from both the groups there and bullied. And it filled me with a lot of rage and, normal thing. Wanted revenge, wanted to fight back again, and I went to the gymnasium and started exercising and pumping iron so that I could be big and strong and be able to fight back again. And that is when, at the age of 12, my parents took me to India and gave me the opportunity to live with grandfather. And the first lesson that grandfather taught me was about understanding the anger and being able to use that energy constructively and positively rather than abusing anger. He said anger is like electricity. It's just as useful and just as powerful, but only if we use it intelligently. But it can be just as deadly and destructive if we abuse it. So just as we channel electrical energy and bring it into our lives and use it for the good of humanity, we must learn to channel anger in the same way so that we can use that energy for the good of humanity rather than abuse the energy and cause death and destruction. He suggested that I write an anger journal. He said every time you get angry about something, don't act on it, don't say anything or do anything that is going to change the course of your life. But write a journal. But write the journal with the intention of finding a solution to the problem, and then commit yourself to finding a solution. Now that is very important, because today a lot of people tell me they've been writing an anger journal for a long time, but it hasn't really helped very much, because what they did was just pour their anger out into the journal. So every time they go back and read the journal, they're just reminded of the incident and they get angry all over again. So we don't want the journal to be a reminder of the incident. We want the journal to help us find an equitable solution to the problem. So it's very important that we write the journal with the intention of finding a solution and then commit ourselves to finding a solution. I did this for many years, and I must say it helped me considerably in learning how to deal with my anger positively and constructively. One of the reasons that I have dedicated my life to doing this work and going and talking with all of you is trying to bring about that understanding between people that we are all the same. We may look different, we may have different color and all that, but we are all human beings. And we need to respect each other as human beings. And I emphasize the word respect because today a lot of people talk about tolerance. And I don't think that's a very positive word. I cringe every time I hear that word tolerance. Because we don't want to tolerate people. We want people to respect each other. Tolerance means that we can all be in this room together because we are all different races and different colors, but we don't need to respect each other. And that's not the kind of relationship we want. We want a relationship where we respect each other, understand each other, and treat each other as human beings. And that is a very significant part of his philosophy of nonviolence. Learning how to build better relationships. So let me first, before I talk about relationships, let me stress this fact that a lot of people seem to think nonviolence is a weapon, is a strategy to be used in certain conflict resolutions. It's not a strategy, it's not a weapon, it's a way of life. You have to believe in it, you have to live it, and you have to practice it. Only then will it be perfect. And that is where the whole concept of relationship comes in. Today, our relationships with each other are based on selfishness. We are always thinking about what am I going to gain from that relationship, and if I don't gain anything from it, why should I bother to have a relationship? And that's a very selfish way of building a relationship. Ideally, a relationship is one based on the four principles of respect, understanding, acceptance, and appreciation. We have to respect ourselves and respect each other and respect our connection with all of creation. You know, we are not independent individuals. We are part of this whole creation. We are a part of this whole world. And whatever we do affects the world, and whatever the world does affects us. It's a mutual relationship there. And we've got to respect that. And it's only through respecting that that we then understand who we are and what we are and why are we here on earth. We are not here by accident. We are not here to while away our time from birth to death. We are here for a purpose. Each one of us is here for a purpose. But because we don't know what that purpose is, we just flounder around and do our own thing from morning till night, and by the end of the life we don't know what we have achieved or what we have contributed to the community. So we have to understand our purpose in life. And when we understand that purpose in life, then we will appreciate each other, and we will be able to build a relationship that is based on mutual respect for each other and not tolerance for each other. And that is when we will then be able to appreciate our own humanity. So these are the principles on which nonviolent relationship is built. We can, one of the most important things that I think we learned, at least I learned from my grandfather, was about the depth and the breadth of his philosophy of nonviolence. Until then, I thought nonviolence, like everybody else, that nonviolence is a weapon, it's a tool, we use it for conflict resolution, and after that we don't care about it. But through a little pencil, a little 3-inch butt of a pencil, he taught me a profound lesson, a lesson that I'll never forget. I threw away a pencil because I thought it was too small for me to use. And I was so sure that grandfather would give me a new pencil when I asked him for one. But that evening when I met grandfather and asked him for a pencil to do my homework with, instead of giving me one, he subjected me to a lot of questions. He wanted to know how the pencil became small and where did I throw it away and why did I throw it away and on and on. And I couldn't understand why he was making such a fuss over a little pencil until he told me to go out and look for it. And I said, you must be joking. He said, you don't expect me to look for a little pencil in the dark? He said, oh yes, I do. Here's a flashlight. And he sent me out with a flashlight, and I must have spent about 2 hours searching for that pencil. And when I finally found it and brought it to him, he said, now I want you to sit here and learn 2 very important lessons. The first lesson is that even in the making of a simple thing like a pencil, we use a lot of the world's natural resources. And when we throw them away, we are throwing away the world's natural resources. And that is violence against nature. And the second lesson is that because in an affluent society we can afford to buy all these things in bulk, we overconsume the resources of the world. And because we overconsume them, we are depriving people elsewhere of these resources, and they have to live in poverty. And that is violence against humanity. And that is when I realized that all of these little things that we do every day, consciously and unconsciously, things that we overconsume or waste or throw away because we have so much of it, that every time we indulge in any of those actions, we are indulging in violence. And then he made me draw a genealogical tree of violence. You know how we do a family tree? We have the grandparent and then the parents and so on. It just keeps building. He made me draw a similar tree of violence, with violence as the grandparent, and physical violence and passive violence as the 2 branches. And every day before I went to bed, I had to analyze and examine everything that I had experienced during the day. Things that I may have done to other people or people may have done to me. Everything had to be analyzed and examined and put in their appropriate places on that tree. If it's physical violence where we use physical force, kicking and beating and punching and slapping and murders and rapes and wars and all of these things where we use physical force against each other, that goes under physical violence. But if it's the kind of violence where we don't use any physical force, sometimes we are not even close to the person we have hurt them, but our actions have hurt them. Like discrimination, or looking down on people, or, the hundreds of things we do, wasting food. For instance, I read in the New York Times not too long ago that in the United States alone, we throw away $20 billion worth of food every year. $20 billion worth of food goes into the garbage every year. When there are so many people dying of hunger around the world, and even in our own country here, there are so many people who don't get enough to eat. Now that is a form of violence. If we have so much of it and we just throw it away and we have no concern for people who don't have any food, all that is passive violence. And then he explained to me, I was amazed when I did this introspection for nearly a few months, 5 or 6 months, and I was able to fill up a whole wall in my room with acts of passive violence. He explained to me the connection between the two. He said, we commit passive violence all the time, every day, consciously and unconsciously. And that generates anger in the victim, and the victim then resorts to physical violence to get justice. So it is passive violence that fuels the fire of physical violence. So logically, if we want to put out that fire of physical violence and create peace, we have to cut off the fuel supply. And since the fuel supply comes from each one of us, we have to become the change we wish to see in the world. If we don't change our habits, our attitudes, our relationships, all of these things, we will never be able to create peace in the world. We have created a whole culture of violence, a culture of violence that has dominated every aspect of our life. Our language has become violent, our relationships are violent, our entertainment is violent, our sports is violent, everything about us is violent. And it's in that culture of violence that we are trying to create peace. How can you create peace when you're living in that culture of violence? The only way we can create peace is by changing that culture of violence into a culture of non-violence. And that doesn't mean weakness. It doesn't mean that you become a doormat and let everybody walk over you. Because violence needs more courage than non-violence. Non-violence needs more courage to practice than violence does. So it's important that we understand these issues and make it a part of our life. But the thing that he taught me and that affected me the most, that our education does not begin and end in schools. Our education is a lifelong process. In schools, you get textbook education. But in life, you get education of experience. And you can learn from that experience and education only if you have an open mind, a mind willing to absorb from life's experiences. But if you think that you have given up, you've done your education in school, now you go out in life and enjoy life and don't learn anything from it, then you stagnate. Then our education is incomplete. So we have to have that open mind and that willingness to learn from every situation. I have learned from my grandfather this lesson, and ever since then I've kept a very open mind. So every day, everybody I meet, every experience that I have, I learn something from it. It's sometimes something good and sometimes something bad. But because I know how to differentiate between the two, I reject the bad and absorb the good. And that is what all of us need to do. Only then do we broaden our perspective, then we consider ourselves to be truly educated and a true human being. Otherwise, we just become like machines, just going about our work every day without any real feelings or any concern about where we are going in our life and what we are doing. Like I said earlier, we are all interdependent and interconnected and interrelated. And we have to accept that and understand that. And it's only through that acceptance and understanding that we will be able to build a proper society, a proper community where there is harmony between people, where we can all live together and be happy together and help each other in their days of difficulty. Now, these are things that we have to learn and practice and make it a part of our life. Then non-violence will be meaningful and become a tool for peace in this world. But otherwise, we'll just, flounder from one crisis to another, and the our humanity will disappear. So these are few lessons, and I hope I've been able to answer all your questions through this. And you asked me to bring something of his personal belonging, and I got these two metal cups. The bigger one is my grandfather's cup, and the smaller one is my mother's glass. In those days, they used metal glasses like this to drink their liquids in, because glass was very expensive and not very practical in that kind of. So they used these metal ones, and now I've inherited them and treasure them. And the other box that you see there is the spinning wheel. I'd like to demonstrate that, he discovered the spinning wheel to spin cotton. Because at that time in India, the British were taking away the Indian cotton to England, processing it, making cloth, and bringing the cloth back to India and selling it at a very exorbitant price. And that impoverished the people of India, and to the extent that many people just couldn't afford to buy clothes, and so they had the minimum clothes and would just wear a little sheet-like thing around their waist, and minimum clothing they would wear. So grandfather decided that political independence in India will make sense only if there is economic independence along with it. And so to make the people of India self-sufficient in producing their own cloth, he invented this machine which makes cotton thread. And it's so simple to use that even children could make cotton thread, and then this cotton thread would be sent to another family who would turn it into cloth. And this is a cloth from cotton that was spun at home. So, this is just a handkerchief, but you could make your shirts and trousers and everything that you needed from that. So I just want to demonstrate that to you. I'll need some help. Not the table.
Is there another one on this side?
No. It's just. Can you all see?
So they can see the inside. See the inside? This is what it looks like on the inside. So anyone want to come up and hold this down? It needs to be
Yeah.
turn up, and then I'll get out of the way. Because it moves around and spins, so you just
So just hold
yeah,
it.
hold it pretty. Yeah.
You'll have to hold it tighter.
Hold it tight.
Yeah, because it moves. Can you all see? Tighter. Yeah. You see, this is how people made cotton thread, and that thread was turned into cloth. How are we doing with time? We still have some time?
Yes.
Oh,
Can we do some questions?
yeah. We have 25 minutes, we can ask questions. What is the most cherished moment that you and your grandfather shared? I think every moment with him was a cherished moment. I lived with him towards the end of his life when everything was coming to a boil. Everything that he worked for and stood for in India was going to get independence, but India was going to be divided into India and Pakistan, and there was a lot of unhappiness over that, and fighting and a lot of killing, and he was in the midst of all of this thing. But in spite of that, he decided he was going to spend an hour with me every day. And he did that religiously. Every day between 4 and 5 was my time. And whatever he was doing, he would give up that and come out and spend that 1 hour with me. Just be a grandfather, would tell me stories, help me with lessons, and that 1 hour was the most cherished hour for me during that period. My parents were, my father was his second son. In fact, we have his photograph here. One of them is my father here. This is my father, and this is my older sister. And they believed in non-violence, and so they practiced it at home. And like I said in the lecture, that it is a way of life. It is how you practice it in your life. They didn't punish us when we were misbehaving. When my two sisters and I were children and we misbehaved, they didn't punish us. They did penance. And the penance took the form of fasting. They would fast depending on how serious the offense was, fast for a day or half a day or whatever time. And they would feed us, they would cook meals, sit at the table, feed us, but they would say they are not eating because they were not good parents. They didn't teach us the right way of behavior. And because the relationship between them and us was based on mutual love and respect, we felt awful when that kind of thing happened. And we made sure that it never happened again. But there's a story that I want to share with you when I was about your age. And I had just started driving, 16 years old. And, we were living in South Africa in this place where it was way out in the wilderness. All around us were just sugarcane plantations. And so when my two sisters and I were growing up, we didn't have anybody our age to relate to and play with and have fun. So we would look for opportunities to go into town and see a movie or visit friends or something. We didn't get those opportunities very frequently because in spite of the fact that it's just 18 miles, in those days driving 18 miles to go and have fun was not a accepted thing. It was too expensive. And so we didn't get those opportunities very frequently. But when we did, we grabbed it. And one Saturday, I remember my dad had to go to town to attend a conference, and he didn't feel like driving that day. And he asked me, would you drive me into town? And I jumped at the opportunity and said yes. And since I was going into town, my mom gave me a list of groceries that she needed. And on the way into town, my dad reminded me of all the little chores that had been pending for a long time. And he said, since you have the whole day to yourself, will you please attend to all these chores? Like getting the car serviced and oil changed and all that. And I said, okay. And when I dropped him off at the conference venue, he said, at 5 o'clock in the evening, I will wait for you outside this auditorium. Come and pick me up and we'll go home together. And I said, okay. And I rushed off and I did all my chores and did everything I was expected to do, and bought the groceries and everything, and left the car in the garage with instructions to do whatever was necessary. And being a 16-year-old, I went straight to the nearest movie theater, and I got so engrossed in a John Wayne double feature that I didn't realize the passage of time. The movie ended at 5:30. And I ran from there to the garage and got the car and rushed to where my dad was waiting for me. And I was about an hour late, and naturally he was anxious and wondering what happened to me and pacing up and down. And so the first question he asked me is, why are you late? And I was so ashamed to tell him that I was sitting there watching a John Wayne double feature that I lied to him, and I said the car wasn't ready, not realizing that he had already called the garage and asked them. And when he caught me in the lie, he said, there's something wrong in the way I brought you up that didn't give you the confidence to tell me the truth, that you felt you had to lie to me. And I have to find out where I went wrong with you, and in order to do that, he said, I'm going to walk home 18 miles. I'm not coming with you in the car. There was absolutely nothing I could do to make him change his mind. He just started walking. It was after 6 in the evening. Much of those 18 miles were through sugarcane plantations, dirt roads, late night, no lights. I couldn't leave him and go away. So for nearly 6 hours, I was crawling behind him in the car, watching him go through that pain and agony for a stupid lie that I uttered. And I decided I was never going to lie again. And that was a tremendous lesson in nonviolent parenting. Because if we punish people for misbehavior, I don't think they learn a lesson from it. I think they just suffer the punishment and say, well, this time I was stupid, I got caught, next time I'll make sure I don't get caught. So the difference here is you're teaching a person, you're changing that person through the lesson rather than just punishing them. And it's a lesson that I'll never forget. It's a very powerful lesson, and that was what nonviolent parenting was, practicing it at home so that we can all learn from it. The worldview today, of course, is a mess. And it's all part of the culture of violence that has created this mess, because we are always exploiting each other, everybody individually as well as collectively as nations. Our foreign policy of every nation is based on what is good for them and what can we get from the rest of the world that we can use for ourselves, and we get it. And then those who can afford to buy all these things, they just buy it up and consume it. And those that can't afford to, they live in poverty. So we have this phenomenon of nearly half of the world living in extreme poverty and the other half of the world in affluence. And so there is the potential for clashes there, and we see that happening all the time with terrorism and other kinds of violence, even in societies. Crime is rampant because we have the disparities and all kinds of things going on in societies. So it's very important for us to understand this whole culture of violence and transform it into a culture of nonviolence if we really want to create peace in the world. and live as sensible, educated human beings. How oppressive does a government have to be before the people to exercise civil disobedience? I don't think there need to be any oppression at all. I think the sense of justice, we should have that sense of justice, and if something is not right and something is unjust, we should try to find a solution to that and try to find a peaceful solution. And if it doesn't happen, then we have to use methods to transform. And I would like to use this latest conflict that we have in this country of racism, and where we still, in spite of the civil rights being granted so many years ago, we still have racism and we still have prejudice. And that is because we didn't use the philosophy of nonviolence to its full extent. We thought that by this getting the civil rights laws passed, that integration will take place and everything will be fine. So we did nothing after the 60s when the civil rights laws were passed. Now the laws can only enable people to be together, but no law on earth can make anybody respect each other if they don't want to. And that is where we are now. The law has enabled everybody to be in this school together, different colors and different races, but there is not that respect that we should have. At least, I don't know in this school, but in many other schools I've been, there's always a conflict between people. So what we, in a violent transformation, when we are aggressive, even without using any physical force, we can be very violent. When we are aggressive, when we try to shake people by the throat and make them accept us, that way we don't change anybody. We only try to make them be afraid of us. What we want is for people to respect and understand us. And that can happen only through true nonviolent action, which is based in educating the people about the differences in culture rather than shoving it down their throats. You see what I'm trying to get at? We have to reach out to people. We have to understand and try to reach out to people and love and respect each other. It's only then that we will be able to get rid of this scourge of racism and prejudice that we have, not only in this country, all over the world we have prejudices for one reason or the other. What do I want my legacy to be? Well, I consider myself to be a peace farmer. And I go wherever I get the opportunity to plant seeds of peace. And I got this opportunity today, so I've come here and tried to plant seeds of peace. And I hope that you will all nurture those seeds of peace and let it flourish so all of us together can make a difference in this world and make it a better place. But I have done my duty. I've planted the seeds in your mind. Now it's up to you whether you're going to nurture those seeds or let those seeds rot and perish. If my grandfather was alive today, how do you think he would feel about the current situations going on in the world? He would be very unhappy with the situation in the world, but he wasn't one who gave up easily or felt frustrated. He would just get down and start working again and just realize that more work needs to be done to transform people, and he would just get down and do that work and transform. So, getting frustrated and giving up was not his way of life. The personal quote that look to when you need advice and help: be the change you want to see. Every time I find myself in a corner or find myself in a conflict, I think of how can I be the change that can resolve this. So that is, I think, the most profound quote. And it's gone viral, and it's just gone all over the world. Everybody wants to talk about be the change. The tragedy is everybody wants to talk about it, but nobody wants to practice it. So it's time that we start practicing it rather than just talking about it. What is the best inspirational message, advice to give to our group of seniors? Well, I hope that I did give you some encouragement and some incentive. We have to become better than we are. It's not just going to happen by itself. It's not going to happen just by getting education. It will only happen when we decide, individually, each one of us decides that I am going to be a better person today than I was yesterday. And that was something my grandfather taught me when I was living with him. That every morning you got to get up and tell yourself that I'm going to be a better person today than I was yesterday. And to be able to become a better person, I had to make a list of all my weaknesses. All the things that I considered to be weaknesses in me, I had to make a list of it and begin to work on those weaknesses and transform them into strength. And I still do that. Every day I still do it, in spite of the fact that I'm now almost 82. But I still do it because I still want to be better than I was. And that should be everybody's motive. We have to become better than we are. And just not through education, but through self-determination. You are a better person, better relationships, better understanding of people, better understanding of the world, more compassionate. There are so many people in the world who are suffering, and we need to do something to help them. You heard about the Gandhi Institute for Nonviolence that I have started, but there's another institute that I started called the Gandhi Worldwide Education Institute. And that was started because I discovered there are millions of children, much younger than all of you, who are living in such abject poverty that they can't even think of going to school and getting an education. I was traveling in a train in Mumbai, India, one day, and I was reading a book, and suddenly I found somebody tugging at my trouser leg. And I looked down, and it was a little kid. I don't think he was more than 5 years old. He was dressed in rags, dirty, and he had a tin full of homemade candy. And he was imploring me to buy that candy. And I thought to myself, I said, I would not allow my 5-year-old kid to be on the train all by himself. What is this kid doing on the train? And so I asked him to get off the station with me, and we sat and talked there. And the story he told me really hurt me so badly that a 5-year-old had to go out and work and sell all that candy. And he was told by his parents to sell all the candy and bring money home, only then he would get something to eat. Otherwise, he wouldn't get any food to eat. And when I met him, it was almost past 5 o'clock in the evening. And he still had half a tin full of that candy. And I thought to myself, when is this kid going to sell all these candy? And when is he going to be able to eat anything? I asked him if he had eaten anything since morning, and he says only little pieces of food that he could get in the garbage. And I said, we are in the 20th century. That was last century. And this still happens in the 20th century. How can we tolerate this? How can we accept this kind of thing? And so I started this institute to raise money and to provide these, rescue them from poverty and provide them with education and some means to break out of that cycle of poverty. So right now we have more than 700 kids that we have rescued in one institution. I hope that we get enough money so that we can replicate that in other parts of the world and try to address the poverty in little ways. And all of us can do this. We don't have to depend on the government or others to do this. All of us can do it if we just take small steps and help a few people at a time. I was in a middle school in Portland, Oregon, where I spoke to the kids about this whole idea and this young boy who had to work for a living. And after the talk, the middle school kids all came up to me and they said, we want to do something to help with this program. What can we do? And I said, you get pocket money from your parents every week or day or whatever. But you get the pocket money and you usually spend that on something that you really don't need. But because you have the money, you go and buy soda or buy some candy or whatever. I said, if you decide that you're going to use only half of that money for yourself and save the other half of the money to help somebody somewhere, all of you collectively together can get so much money. And they took up this challenge. The teachers helped them. And within a few months, they sent me a check of $7,000. 200 kids, they save, and they still continue to do that. And the purpose in this was twofold. Not just to get the money for these poor kids, but to make those kids who were giving realize that they had a responsibility and they had to awaken their conscience, compassion, so that they could help people. And in small ways, we can make that kind of a difference. Now I've run out of questions. Any of you have any questions? No? No questions mean no inspiration.
Let's give Mr. Gandhi a round of applause.
On behalf of the students and staff here at Integrated Arts and Technology High School, we would like to give you a token of our appreciation for coming to speak to us today. We've all benefited and learned from your values, from your valuable lessons, and your grandfather's message and work. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. Wonderful. Thank you all.
Is it okay? Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Do you guys want to come up front? We're going to get a group shot. Come on up.
would you like to be? Would you like to sit? Would you like to stand? And they'll kind of congregate around you. We'll have a balance, some on this side, half over here. You want to have some in the front? Anybody want to be in the front? I do. You do? I do. You want to sit? We can get you a chair. Oh, okay. How you doing? Anybody else want to sit in the front?
Get closer. Alexis, you can't see your face.
You guys at the back can come up here in front.
Sit down. Come on, sit down.
Someone in the way back we can't see.
Yeah.
Yes, you.
Come front of the table. She doesn't want to be seen.
Right. Excuse me.